Hi, I'm Maureen. I spent 5 years raising my grandson while his parents worked without asking for a single dime. I thought I was helping. I thought I was needed. But one day, my son looked me in the eye and said, "You're useless." They threw a birthday party for my grandson in my own house and didn't invite me, sold the home I paid for, replaced my name on a park bench with theirs. Now they've trained my grandson to say, "I'm gone." How does a family erase someone who gave them everything, and why did I let them? The coffee brewed just like it always did, the same bubbling sound filling the silence in my small kitchen. I folded Nora's little blue t-shirt and tucked it into his overnight bag. His cartoon socks were always mismatched, but he didn't care. 5 years of this, waking up before the sun, packing lunches, wiping chocolate off chins, making sure homework was tucked inside plastic folders. Victor and Cheryl were usually gone before the clock hit 7. I'd hear the back door open and close while I was still tying Nora's shoes. No hugs, no check-ins, just silence, and the smell of Cheryl's hairspray lingering in the hallway. I told myself it was fine. They were busy building a life. I was just the extra set of hands. It all started with one weekend. Just one. Cheryl had picked up nursing shifts, and Victor was already drowning at the firm. "Just for now, Mom," he'd said, kissing my cheek as if the softness of his voice would make it feel less like obligation. Cheryl gave a tight smile, said thank you, and didn't look back. That one Saturday turned into Sunday, then the following weekend, then every weekend. Soon, weekday pickups were added. Before I knew it, I'd silently agreed to raise my grandson without ever signing a contract, without a single day off. But I told myself, they're young, they're overwhelmed, I'm helping. Helping. That word had a warmth to it once. Now it felt like cement. This morning, Cheryl's message popped up while I was pouring cereal. He's outside. That smiley face irritated me more than I wanted to admit. I opened the door, and there he was, Nora, tiny backpack and all, sitting on the porch swing alone. Cheryl's car was already halfway down the street. No wave, no good morning, just a 7-year-old delivered like a package. He looked up and grinned, not knowing any better. My heart broke and swelled all at once. I used to smile at these drop-offs. Today, I barely managed a curve of the lips. I held the door open, and he ran in, shoes squeaking on the tile. That afternoon, after Nora fell asleep on the couch watching dinosaur cartoons, I stood in the kitchen staring at the calendar. A small doctor's appointment I'd been putting off for months was scheduled for the next week. Just a few hours, nothing major. I picked up my phone, took a breath, and texted Cheryl. "Hey, would you be able to keep Nora next Tuesday morning? I have a quick doctor visit." Her reply came after 10 minutes. "Aren't you watching him like always?" I clarified. "Just one morning. I needed it." An hour later, she walked through the door, grabbed a juice from the fridge without looking at me, and said, "You volunteered. Nobody asked you to." Her words hit like a slap. Victor was sitting in the living room, scrolling through his phone. He didn't say a word. Dinner was quiet that night. Cheryl heated leftovers for Nora. Victor barely looked up. I washed the dishes with my back turned to them, the sponge wearing down against plates I didn't eat off of. I wanted to scream, but all I did was nod when Nora asked if we could build a fort after his bath. That night, in the guest bedroom that used to be a storage room, I lay awake replaying the scene. The way Cheryl had said it, flat, cold, as if I had forced myself into their lives. You volunteered. My mother's voice echoed from somewhere deep in my memory. She used to say, "Silence is power if you use it wisely." But tonight, silence didn't feel like power. It felt like being invisible. I stared at the ceiling fan spinning above me, thinking how strange it was that you could give everything to someone and still be seen as extra. The Saturday grocery run took longer than usual. I'd stopped by the farmer's market on 6th Street to grab Nora's favorite strawberries, the small, sweet kind that only show up for a few weeks each spring. By the time I turned the corner onto our block, my arms full of paper bags. Something caught my eye. Pink balloons bobbing at the front gate. I slowed. There were streamers too. A folding table sat in the driveway with colorful gift bags and a giant cardboard sign that read, "Happy 8th birthday, Nora." My steps faltered as I approached. Through the open blinds, I saw Cheryl flitting around the living room, taping more balloons to the windows. Victor stood near the kitchen island, chatting with someone I didn't recognize. Nora's laugh echoed from the backyard. For a moment, I stood there in the driveway, bags sagging in my arms, waiting for someone, anyone, to notice me. Cheryl eventually opened the front door, her face tight with surprise. "Oh, hey, Maureen. You're back." She glanced at the bags, then over her shoulder at the living room. "We didn't think you'd want the noise. Just a few friends from school, real low-key." I nodded, my throat dry. "Sure. Of course." She didn't invite me in, just turned back into the house, calling over her shoulder, "You can put the berries in the fridge." The next morning, I walked into the kitchen to find a photo collage taped to the fridge. Bright photos printed on glossy paper, hastily arranged in a heart shape. Cheryl, Victor, Nora, and a dozen others smiled back at me. Her yoga friend Melissa, their neighbor Tom, even Cheryl's boss with a goofy birthday hat. My stomach turned as I scanned the images. I wasn't in any of them, not one. The caption in gold marker read, "All the people who make Nora's life special." I touched the edge of the paper, then let my hand drop. Maybe it was just an oversight. Maybe I hadn't been standing in the right place when the photos were taken. Or maybe I wasn't supposed to be in them. Later that week, I opened my inbox to find a forwarded message from the school. Classroom reading day parents or legal guardians only. A tiny note added at the top. Just an FYI, already handled, no need. It was from Cheryl. I typed a reply. "Happy to attend. If you need help, I'd love to be there." Her response came within minutes. "The school's updated emergency contact. You're not on it anymore." I stared at the screen, rereading the sentence. My name, removed. I hadn't even realized I was erased until someone told me directly. That afternoon, I found myself dusting the living room shelf. It was something I did on autopilot, cloth in hand, moving through motions while my thoughts wandered. I pulled out a slightly tilted photo album tucked behind a stack of mail. I hadn't seen it in years. Inside were pages of Nora's earliest days, hospital bands, footprints, photos from her first bath. One picture stopped me cold. Victor holding Nora, Cheryl beaming beside him. A tiny swaddle of pink in their arms. My hands had been there, I remembered, holding Nora first while Cheryl slept. But in the picture, only their faces were framed. My hands had been cropped out. I closed the album gently and slid it back. Then I walked out to the backyard and sat in the farthest corner, under the elm tree that Nora used to love climbing. The sun was lower now, casting long shadows across the grass. The wind moved just enough to rustle the branches, and I wrapped my arms around myself. I remembered the night Nora had that awful stomach bug. Cheryl had panicked. Victor had frozen. It was me who stayed up, pressing cool cloths to her forehead, humming lullabies until she slept. I didn't ask for recognition. I didn't want applause. I just wanted to matter. But now, this wasn't about forgetfulness. It wasn't about busyness or being overlooked. This was something quieter and sharper. It was deliberate, a kind of rewriting, a slow, careful erasure done with a smile. And when your presence no longer makes a difference, you start asking if your absence ever would. I told Victor about the surgery over coffee. He didn't look up from his phone. I kept it short. Just a quick outpatient procedure on my left eye. Something the doctor had been suggesting for months. They'll need to dilate and clean under the lid. I won't be able to drive for a few hours, I said. Victor blinked, glanced at the toaster like it was about to speak. Then, still not meeting my eyes, he muttered, "So who's picking up Nora?" I paused, the question stinging more than it should have. I was hoping Cheryl could do it. Just that morning, I offered. From the hallway, Cheryl's voice came flat and sharp. "If you can't help anymore, just say it." No one asked if I was okay. No one asked when or how I'd get there back. Just silence. Like I'd just confessed I'd failed them somehow. The morning of the surgery, I sat in the waiting room, wrapped in a sweater too thin for the overzealous hospital air conditioning. Families came and went, husbands holding purses, daughters flipping through magazines. When the nurse called me in, she smiled gently. "Is someone here to drive you home?" I nodded before I could stop myself. "My daughter-in-law. She's just running a little late." The lie tumbled out with practiced ease. I didn't want pity. I didn't want questions. But 2 hours later, when I stepped out into the parking lot alone, it felt heavier than I'd imagined. I pulled out my phone, opened the rideshare app, and watched the little car icon crawl toward me. The driver didn't ask questions. He dropped me off in front of the house I used to call home. I slipped inside unnoticed and lay on the couch, letting the bandage rest against the armrest. Nora was at school. Victor and Cheryl were at work. I was alone, and somehow that felt more crowded than any room I'd been in that week. 2 weeks later, Victor hosted a barbecue. "Just burgers and beer, Ma," he said. "You're welcome to come by." I did. I brought a pasta salad, the kind Nora loved, with the spiral noodles and extra olives. When I arrived, the backyard was already full. Lawn chairs were set in a neat semicircle around the grill. Every seat had a name card. Melissa, Tom, even Nora's teacher. I searched for mine. There wasn't one. I peeked into the garage and grabbed a dusty folding chair, dragging it out to a shady patch near the trash bins. Nobody said a word. I set down my salad, sat, and folded my hands in my lap. Dinner was loud, the kind of fake cheerful that masks tension. People laughed too hard. Cheryl's voice rang out above the others. "Remember when Nora had that awful fever last year?" she said. "I had to sleep on the floor next to her crib. Poor thing wouldn't let me go." Victor chimed in, chuckling. "You were a wreck. I thought you were going to move into her room permanently." They all laughed. I didn't, because it wasn't true. That night, Cheryl had been working a double. Victor was out of town. Nora had thrown up twice, her tiny body burning up with fever. I held her all night, whispering stories into her damp curls, wiping her forehead with cool cloths. She clung to me, moaning in her sleep, and I rocked her in the old armchair until the sun came up. But now, that night belonged to someone else. Later, when I returned to my room, I pulled out the notebook I kept in the drawer. Not a journal exactly, more like a place where I put things I couldn't say out loud. I wrote one sentence. How many things have I done that now belong to someone else's memory? I stared at the words, then closed the book. The house was quiet, but not the peaceful kind. It was the kind of silence that stands too close, that watches you from the corner. I sat still for a long time, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the wall clock. There was a time I thought silence meant peace. Now I knew better. And once you're erased from the stories they tell, it's only a matter of time before they erase you from the room. After dinner that night, I went upstairs while Nora brushed his teeth and Cheryl scrolled through her phone on the couch. Victor stayed glued to the TV, volume low, but his attention locked. No one noticed as I stepped into my room and gently closed the door behind me. The air inside felt tighter than usual. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the closet for a long time before finally standing. I packed slowly, just essentials. A couple of folded blouses, a change of slacks, the cardigan I always kept draped over the chair, my toothbrush. I slipped them into the canvas tote I used for library runs. I left the door cracked so I could still hear the house, the soft whir of the fridge, the muted hum of the evening news. Cheryl's sudden laugh at something I couldn't hear. None of it sounded like home anymore. When I stepped back into the hallway, no one looked up. I walked past them, purse over one shoulder, bag in hand. I wasn't sure if they'd ask where I was going, but they didn't. Not a single word. That silence confirmed what I had feared for weeks. I was already gone to them. I didn't say goodbye. Lisa opened the door before I even knocked. Her porch light glowed, warm, softer than the hallway lights at Victor's. She didn't ask why I was there or how long I planned to stay. She just stepped aside and wrapped me in a hug. Her embrace was familiar, not pitying, not dramatic, just solid. "The guest room's yours," she said, and I followed her inside. That night, I cried harder than I had in years. It wasn't loud or messy. It was the kind of crying you do into a pillow so no one else hears, even though you're finally in a place where someone would. The next morning, I woke up early and needed air. I slipped out before Lisa stirred, walking with no real direction, until I found myself near the park where Nora and I used to spend our Saturdays. The bench near the fountain had always been ours. I'd sponsored it with part of my retirement bonus, just a small plaque, nothing grand. I walked closer and froze. The plaque was gone. In its place was a shiny, new plate. Purse, family, legacy, spot. My fingers hovered over the lettering. The letters so clean, it was like they'd never known anything else. The previous plaque had read, "For Nora, from Grandma." I remembered choosing the font, the engraving, standing proud beside it when Nora first climbed onto the bench with his juice box and said, "This one's ours." Now it wasn't. I didn't sit. I couldn't. I just stood there, numb, before walking back to Lisa's with the sky warming behind me and the coffee shops beginning to stir. That evening, we cooked together. I chopped onions while she stirred soup. It felt like a ritual we hadn't shared in years, simple and unspoken. She didn't try to fix anything, just handed me ingredients and listened when I was ready. "You don't owe them silence anymore," she said, while slicing bread. "That's not kindness, that's disappearing." I nodded, my hand steady over the cutting board. I was always the first to forgive, I said quietly. The first to bend. The first to make it easier. Lisa looked at me then, eyes sharp with love. If they don't see you, scream. That night, I sat at the kitchen table alone with my phone. I drafted the message 3 times before settling on the truth. I need space, but I'm still your mother. If you care to talk, you'll call. I hit send, and then I placed the phone face down on the table, the way you close a book you've already read twice, realizing the ending doesn't change no matter how many times you revisit it. And sometimes the worst silence isn't when no one talks. It's when no one listens. The bank app loaded slowly that morning. My hands hovered over the screen, not from hesitation, but from finality. The monthly transfer I'd set up years ago, the quiet money I'd been funneling into Victor and Cheryl's account to help with groceries, was still active. I stared at the number, the date, the name. There was no message of thanks, no nod of acknowledgement, just the same quiet pull from my account into theirs. A quiet debt I never agreed to. I tapped cancel. The app asked me if I was sure. I was. 3 days passed before the phone rang. I recognized the number instantly. Victor's tone wasn't angry, not at first. "Hey, Mom," he began casual. The grocery card bounced. "Is everything all right?" I wiped my hands on a dish towel. "Yes, I just decided it was time to stop sending money since I'm not living there anymore." There was a pause, long enough for me to hear his jaw tighten through the phone. "That's not what family does." I didn't raise my voice. "Apparently, it is." The line went silent, then ended. No follow-up. No, I understand. Just the sharp click of someone hanging up on a truth they didn't like. That afternoon, I sat at Lisa's kitchen table, sipping lukewarm tea, when my phone buzzed. It was a message from her, not more than a screenshot, with one sentence underneath. "You might want to see this." It was a Facebook Marketplace listing, a plush bear. I recognized it instantly, small, brown, with the yellow bow I'd sewn on its neck. The tag embroidered in gold thread. "Love, Grandma." Listed by Cheryl. The caption read, "Outgrown, no longer needed." I didn't cry. I printed the screenshot, walked into the guest room, and pulled out a manila folder. On the tab, I wrote in capital letters, "Records they'll deny." I slipped the page inside. Behind it, already, was a printed copy of the deed to the house, a photo of the park bench, an old birthday email never replied to. This wasn't just hurt anymore. It was evidence. That evening, the sun dipped behind Lisa's fence as I stood before the mirror in the hallway. I was wearing my mother's scarf, faded teal, edges soft from years of wear. I touched it gently, thinking of her voice. "Bend when you must, but don't break unless it's on purpose." I stared at my reflection. "You told me to bend. I bent. Now I break, but not like you did." I folded the scarf and placed it in the drawer. My spine felt straighter, not from pride, not from vengeance, from clarity. They had taken and taken, then called it love. When I finally drew a line, they called it betrayal. But they forgot who taught them to speak and who stayed silent too long. The package arrived on a Tuesday. Lisa had stepped out to run errands, and I was halfway through folding laundry when the doorbell rang. It was a plain brown box, taped at the edges, my name written in Cheryl's tidy, emotionless script. I recognized it right away, not because of the handwriting, but because of the weight I felt even before lifting it. I brought it inside, set it on the table, and stared at it for a few minutes before opening it. Inside was the plush bear I had given Nora when she turned 5. It had taken me weeks to find one like it, soft enough for her sensitive skin, big enough to hug, but not so large it would clutter her bed. I'd embroidered the tag myself. Love, Grandma. But now the tag was gone. In its place was a new voice module. I pressed the paw. Cheryl's voice echoed from the bear's belly, cheerful, calculated. Good night, sweetheart. Mommy loves you. Also inside the box, folded neatly, was a letter. Printed. Not handwritten. Not signed. We no longer require your involvement. Please respect our space. I didn't cry. I sat there, the bear on the table like a witness to a trial no one had asked me to attend. It wasn't the bear itself. It was what it meant. The rewriting, the re-recording, the quiet theft of something that had once belonged to me, to Nora and me, erased like I never existed. When Lisa returned, I was still sitting in the same spot. She didn't ask questions, just poured coffee, sat across from me, and waited. I slid the bear over to her. She pressed the paw once, twice. Cheryl's voice played again, chipper and cold. Lisa blinked slowly, then looked at me. We're documenting everything now, she said. Not for them, for you. So, you remember you're not crazy. That night, I pulled out a new folder and labeled it in bold ink, just so I don't forget who I was here. I logged the date, the package contents, the letter, and my reaction. I attached a photo of the bear, now stripped of my thread, my voice, my care. The next morning, I went into the spare closet and found the old keepsake box I'd been too afraid to open since I moved in. Inside were the hospital bracelets from Nora's birth, a photo of her clutching a juice box with her cheeks puffed out, and a tiny thumb drive, the chip. I plugged it into Lisa's speaker and pressed play. My voice, slow and steady. Shh, Grandma's here. You're safe. You're so loved. It didn't break me. It didn't wreck me. It reminded me that I had existed in that child's world, wholly and deeply, no matter what Cheryl rewrote. That night after Lisa had gone to bed, I picked up my phone and typed out a message to Victor. I received the bear. I hope one day you remember who gave it first. I waited. I watched the screen, no reply. I opened the drawer beside me, placed the printed message inside the folder, marked character evidence, and closed it. They were done using me, but they weren't done punishing me for stepping away. Lisa was scrolling through her messages that morning when she paused, face tightening. She turned the phone toward me without a word. On screen was a short video. At first, it looked like any home recording. Nora sitting cross-legged on the living room rug, a juice box in hand, hair a little messy. Then I heard the voice behind the camera. Tell us where Grandma is, sweetie. Nora looked up, eyes wide, unsure. A beat later, coached, she recited, Grandma is gone. Grandma doesn't live here anymore. A man laughed in the background. Victor. It was unmistakable. My chest didn't cave in like I thought it might. Instead, something inside me calcified. I thanked Lisa and left the room before she could say anything. Later that afternoon, a knock on the door pulled me from my thoughts. Lisa's neighbor, Angela, had dropped by to return a casserole dish. She lingered at the door longer than usual. I saw a post, she started gently, from Cheryl. Something about you stepping away to find yourself again? That you didn't want the responsibility anymore? I closed the door with a polite nod, but inside, the storm picked up again. That phrase, find yourself, was the prettiest lie I'd ever heard about being cast aside. Cheryl and Victor weren't just erasing me. They were painting over my image with a new story, one where I was unstable, selfish, dramatic, one where they were the victims of a woman too emotional to handle a changing role. And the worst part, some people believed it. That evening, I poured myself a glass of water and sat at the dining table. My phone buzzed. A single line from Victor on my birthday. "Let's not pretend anymore. You're not her grandmother." No, happy birthday, no call. Just that. I didn't reply. I didn't scream. I took a screenshot and printed it, slipped it into the folder marked character evidence. Behind the letter. Behind the bear photo. Behind everything else. Lisa urged me to post something, a counterstatement. "You don't have to spill everything," she said, "but you should say something. Otherwise, they get to write all of it." But I shook my head. "Let them talk," I said. "Every word they throw becomes one more brick, not on my wall, but on theirs. The higher they build it, the harder it'll fall." She looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. That night, I sat on the edge of the bed, holding the USB drive I kept near my documents. It was blank until now. I opened the recorder app and began to speak. No rehearsed words, no grand declarations. "Nora," I said, voice steady, "I didn't leave you. I left a place where love stopped existing. You didn't push me out. That wasn't your choice. But if you ever wonder, if you ever doubt what I felt for you, know this: I would have stayed forever." They closed the door. I saved the file, labeled it simply, "For Nora, one day." Then I slid the drive into the fireproof box in my closet, placed between my birth certificate and a photo of me holding Nora when she was 3. We were both laughing in that picture, eyes crinkled, faces close. They erased me from their home, their pictures, their posts, but not from the truth. And truth has a longer memory than spite. I only went to the county clerk's office because I'd gotten a flyer about a senior tax exemption. Simple enough. The lady behind the desk was kind, maybe in her 30s, with a name tag that said Megan. She asked for the address and tapped at her keyboard, and then she blinked and tilted her head. "You said you own the property at 1134 Maple." "Yes," I answered. "Well, I did." She hesitated. "I'm sorry, but the deed doesn't list you as the current owner." I didn't understand right away. "I'm sorry. What?" She turned the screen toward me. "It shows Cheryl Pierce. It was transferred last June." I nodded politely and asked for a copy. Megan printed it without question. I thanked her, left quietly, and sat in my car for nearly 15 minutes without starting the engine. The paper sat in my lap. There it was, in black and white. Cheryl's name, listed as the new owner. Victor's signature, under witness. I remembered the day I handed Victor the original deed. "Don't worry, Mom," he'd said. "This house will always be yours." He smiled like it was a sacred promise. I believed him. I believed the boy I raised, not the man who signed his mother out of her own home. Back at Lisa's house, I added the document to the folder I now kept in the drawer beside my bed. The cover was worn, corners soft from handling. It had grown thick. Letters, screenshots, voicemail transcripts, a photo of the park bench they'd reclaimed as their own. I pulled out a stack of sticky notes and labeled each piece of evidence. June, deed filed. Verbal promise, Victor, 2019. Displacement, April BBQ. Each label made the pile heavier in meaning, even if it didn't add weight. Lisa walked in mid-label and paused, watching. "Time to stop surviving," she said softly, "and start defending." I nodded. It's not revenge. It's record keeping. Later that evening, I sat with my phone in my lap. I wasn't sure I would do it until I did. I took a photo of the deed, just the top portion. Cheryl's name circled in red. I posted it to my social media page with one caption. Don't worry, I kept the receipts. I set the phone down. I didn't check it again until well after dinner. By then, the comments had begun piling up. Wait, what? Cheryl owns the house now? This can't be right. Old friends, former co-workers, even my cousin from Dallas. Some simply posted a sad face. Others sent direct messages I didn't open. I didn't need pity. I didn't need outrage. I needed the truth to breathe. After sundown, the doorbell rang. Lisa answered, and I heard his voice before I saw his face. Victor. I stepped into the living room slowly, arms crossed, back steady. He didn't look angry, just flustered, defensive. Why did you make this public? I didn't blink. Because you spent the last 6 months rewriting the story. I got tired of waiting for an invitation to exist in it. His mouth opened, but no words came. He looked down, then around, like the room might offer him a line to say. It didn't. This was between us, Mom. No, I said. You made it between you and your version of me. I just introduced everyone to the real one. He left 5 minutes later. No apology, no denial. Just the weight of exposure pressing against his silence. And once the story is yours again, you don't wait to be written in, you hold the pen. The morning after the post went live, I sat in Lisa's sunroom, scrolling through a screen full of opinions. Some were short, just emojis or passive-aggressive questions. Others were wordy, telling me I should have handled it privately, that family matters didn't belong on the internet. But between them, there were other voices, calmer, sharper. One message from a woman I hadn't spoken to in years simply said, "It took guts. They owe you more than a thank you." I didn't reply to any of them. I didn't owe a defense for truth. Later that afternoon, I found a thick envelope wedged in Lisa's mailbox. Cream-colored paper, embossed edge, formal. The return address was the local elementary school. I knew before opening it. It was Nora's graduation announcement. Inside, a folded card read, "We're proud to invite you to celebrate the accomplishments of our students." Beneath, in smaller print, attendance limited to 2 guardians only. No additional guests allowed. No RSVP line. No mention of me. I sat at the kitchen table, holding the card, thinking back to when I had filled out her school enrollment paperwork, when I drove her every morning, even when the Texas heat made the steering wheel burn, when I packed snacks in her favorite containers and picked her up from the nurse's office. That time she threw up in art class. Now, I wasn't even worth a line on the invitation. That evening, I passed a boutique downtown I used to visit before Nora's birthdays. The front window displayed a rack of tiny white dresses, lace-trimmed, ribbon-sashed, innocent in a way that hurt to look at. I stood there imagining her in one, twirling, laughing. Then I pictured myself watching from behind the glass, like I was now. I didn't step inside. I didn't cry. I exhaled, long and steady, a grief that didn't ask for permission. The morning of the graduation, I sat by the phone, not to call, not to beg, just to be near something that still connected me. I stared at the screen, thumb hovering over Victor's contact, not to ask to come, just to say I'm proud of her, just to say I never left her. But I didn't dial. I picked up a pen instead. I wrote a letter, careful and simple. To my granddaughter, it began. One day, You may hear stories about why I wasn't there. This is mine. I wrote about the park days, the bedtime songs, the packed lunches. I wrote about love that wasn't always visible, but never left. I folded it neatly and slid it into the fireproof box next to the USB. On the envelope, I wrote, "To be opened when you're ready to hear all sides." That night, Lisa came home with a slice of cake in a cardboard box. She didn't say happy graduation or sorry. She just set it down and poured us both tea. We sat in quiet. "You missed a moment," she said after a while. I nodded. They missed something too. Lisa raised her cup, a quiet toast. "And one day," I added, "they'll realize I didn't leave to punish. I left to survive." Lisa set the coffee mug down gently in front of me. "People are talking," she said without lifting her eyes, "about Cheryl, the neighbors, church ladies. Even the guy at the post office asked me if I knew what was going on. I didn't ask what they were saying. I didn't need to. The truth always leaves a trail. It doesn't shout. It seeps, quietly, persistently, until it stains everything they tried to keep clean. I hadn't logged into Facebook in days, but the post was still moving, still rippling through digital corners I hadn't touched in years. I saw a comment from a woman I went to high school with. She never struck me as the type to lie. One from a younger cousin. Family doesn't mean silence. They weren't defending me out of obligation. They were remembering. That weekend, I stopped by the church food pantry with Lisa. I hadn't been in months. A woman I barely knew pulled me aside near the canned beans. "Is it true?" she whispered, eyes darting around. I smiled, small and tired. I never say things I can't prove. She nodded, then didn't ask again. The following Tuesday, a message popped up from an old friend from our church days. He used to lead the men's prayer breakfast. Victor's manager approached him about the post, he wrote. Apparently someone forwarded it. They're concerned he's not handling personal matters well. I sat with that a moment. I didn't feel vindicated, just steady. I replied with 2 words, "Thank you." Later that day, I walked to the park, the same path, the same creaky bench. It was still there, but something had changed. The Pierce family plaque gleamed in the sun, still bolted, still spotless, but someone had taken a red marker and written across it, "Ask Grandma." I stood for a long time, reading the words over and over. I hadn't done it. I didn't know who had, but I sat down, folded my hands in my lap, and let the wind wrap around me. For once, I didn't feel like the one being erased. 2 days later, an email from Nora's school popped into my inbox. "End of year update," the subject read. Buried at the bottom was a reminder. "Please confirm emergency contacts for fall enrollment." I blinked. My name was still listed. A clerical error, maybe, or a forgotten line on a form, or something neither Cheryl nor Victor had gotten around to undoing. I didn't click anything. I didn't respond. I printed it, slipped it into my folder, another entry in a timeline that no longer needed justification. That evening, I found myself in the guest room, holding an old children's book, Nora's favorite, the one with the bunny who traveled across seasons to find its way home. I sat on the edge of the bed and read it aloud. Lisa leaned against the doorway, arms folded, saying nothing. When I finished the last line, I didn't close the book right away. "For when she comes back," I said softly, my voice not breaking, just breathing. Lisa nodded. We sat in silence, but this silence wasn't theirs. It wasn't punishment or power play. It was mine now. And if no one claps when you survive, that doesn't mean you didn't. I was standing in line at the grocery store, holding a carton of eggs and a bunch of bananas, when I heard my name. I turned and saw Carla, my cousin on my mother's side. We hadn't spoken in over 3 years. Her smile was tight, uncertain, like she didn't know which side of the fence to land on. "I saw your post," she said, "the one about the house." I nodded. She didn't ask for an explanation, didn't press or prod like others had. She just added, "You look strong, though." I thanked her. That was enough. For the first time, I didn't feel like I needed to explain myself to anyone. What they chose to believe about me was theirs to carry, not mine. Later that day, I sat at Lisa's dining table with my phone in hand. I drafted a message to Victor. "I hope you're well." 5 words, harmless, hollow. I stared at them for a long time before deleting every letter. I set the phone down, looked out the window, and whispered, "I hope she's well." I didn't need to say her name. Lisa, seated across from me, heard it anyway. Some love doesn't have to be loud to be true. The next morning, over toast and coffee, Lisa asked a question she hadn't dared to voice before. "Do you want them to come back?" I paused. "I want them to heal," I said. "Whether that includes me, I don't know anymore." Lisa nodded slowly. She didn't push. That was one of her gifts. She let quiet do its own work. That Sunday, I took a walk around the neighborhood. It had been years since I'd looped back through our old street. The house looked the same from the outside. Fresh paint, trimmed hedges, the porch swing still slightly crooked. I kept walking. I didn't stop, didn't glance at the windows. I didn't need to. The birds were louder than usual, almost joyful, as if the sky had nothing left to carry. When I returned home, I dusted the top of my dresser and pulled out a frame I hadn't touched in months. Inside was a photo of me and Nora on the porch, taken years ago. We were laughing, heads tilted toward each other, eyes squinting against the sun. She had a smudge of chocolate on her chin. I had a sunflower tucked behind my ear. I placed it gently beside my bed, not to mourn what was gone, but to honor what had been real. I had existed in that memory, too, not as a placeholder or a helper, but as a part of it, fully, unequivocally. There was no phone call, no letter, no knock at the door, but I didn't need them to speak to know that something had shifted. The silence didn't belong to me anymore. Some goodbyes are loud, others are just the sound of no one calling. And you, learning not to wait. The sun spilled through the curtains with no urgency, no alarm clock, no school bus to chase, no silent tension waiting for me on the other side of a bedroom door. I moved through the house slowly, not because I was tired, but because nothing was chasing me anymore. I brewed my coffee and turned on the old jazz station Lisa liked. The music filled the kitchen without demanding anything in return. I sat with my journal, not to document pain or gather proof, but to write for myself. Notes, grocery lists, snippets of dreams I didn't want to forget. I was no longer keeping track of what they did. I was paying attention to how I felt. Peace doesn't shout, it breathes. Later that morning, I opened the fireproof box from the closet. I hadn't touched it in weeks. Inside was the letter I wrote to Nora, folded with care, its corners soft now from my own fingertips. I reread it slowly, resisting the urge to change a word. I added a photo, me and Nora in the backyard, years ago. The one where she was blowing bubbles and I was caught mid-laugh, head thrown back, eyes squinting. I sealed them together in a fresh envelope, tapped the box shut again, and whispered to myself, "She'll find it when she's ready. Or not. But it's there." I wasn't saving it for her forgiveness. I was saving it for her understanding. That afternoon, I walked to the park. It was warm, the kind of heat that sits gentle on your shoulders, not oppressive, just present. The bench was still there, but the plaque, my plaque, had been changed again. This one was new, clean, without red marker or scratch metal. It read, "Dedicated by a grandmother who never stopped showing up, even when she wasn't invited." I stared at it for a long time. I hadn't ordered it, but I knew who had. Lisa didn't say anything when I asked. She just handed me the receipt and said, "Some truths deserve a permanent place." On the walk home, I passed the bakery where I used to buy cupcakes for Nora's birthdays. I paused, then stepped inside. There was a lemon tart in the glass case, her favorite, and mine. I bought one. At the counter, the young cashier asked, "Celebrating something?" I smiled, just because I want one. Back at home, I set the tart on a small plate and placed it beside my journal. I opened to the last page and wrote one final sentence. I was never asking to be needed. I just wanted to be seen. Now I see myself. I closed the book, not with a period, but with a breath, a deep, quiet breath. Sometimes closure isn't a door slamming shut. It's a quiet moment in your own kitchen, eating a lemon tart for no reason other than you want to. For anyone listening who's been made to feel small in the very place they gave their heart to, you are not alone. I learned that survival doesn't always mean fighting. Sometimes it just means choosing yourself every morning, even when no one's watching. So let me ask you, what are you choosing to keep? What truth are you holding on to, even if no one claps for it? If this story touched something inside you, drop a 1 in the comments or tell me where you're tuning in from. If it didn't, that's okay too. I'd love to hear why. Let's talk. And hey, if you want more stories that speak from the heart, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss one.